Hello and welcome to the Hoop Collective podcast. We talk about the NBA, which we're doing on Thursday evening. Joining us from New York City, where he's just back from spending Christmas Day in Boston, watching the Sixers pull off the upset of Christmas Day, beating the Celtics on their home floor. It's Tim Bontemps.
Hello, everybody.
Hope you didn't get injured in pregame warmups either, Mr. Bontemps. It was a little dangerous out there. Joel Embiid ended up playing in that game, but I got to tell you, when I saw that video, I almost thought it was some sort of joke that Joel Embiid could have gotten hurt warming up on Christmas.
It only could have happened to Joel Embiid. Let's put it that way.
That's true. Joining us from Dallas, Texas, where he was there yesterday, the Timberwolves get a much-needed victory, a real boost, but really the story of the game was what happened to the star player of the Dallas Mavericks, who our man Tim MacMahon wrote a book about called The Wonder Boy, which is coming out soon. You could have pre-ordered it for Christmas. It's Bam MacMahon.
Howdy, partners. I appreciate the plug. I would add Kevin Durant to the candidates of a pregame warm-up injury. Unfortunately,
that did happen. Oh my God.
Been through that before.
Oh my God. I was at that game. Oh
yeah,
my God.
You had to scurry out there and try to figure out what the hell happened.
I was eating pregame meal and the Suns came over and said, yeah, Durant's out. It was his first game, remember, because he had been traded while he was hurt. And I was in and out of Phoenix all year that year. Anyway, forget about it. I thought it was a joke. It was not.
We all have way too much experience, tracking superstar injuries. Unfortunately, it's been a big part of Bontemps' this season. And it's just part of the reality for the Mavericks now. Luka's been banged up a fair amount this year, and this is the most significant of the ailments that he's dealt with.
So
professional segue right there.
Well done. As we are recording this, the Mavericks haven't put out an injury report from following Luka's MRI. They'll probably delay that as if putting it out 3 hours later will make a difference. But MacMahon, this is the same calf that he's had several injuries with. He obviously left the game yesterday on crutches. This is not going to be a one-game absence. It's unfortunate because it was a tremendous finish to this game. Kyrie having an enormous second half. I think Kyrie Irving had 25 points in the second half, had a three-pointer with like 10 or 12 seconds left that could have put.
Yes.
How much? It was 36. He went for 2 for 1. That's right.
Yeah.
I questioned it, but he was red hot at the time. But anyway, unfortunately, that was the big takeaway from this game. Not the great Ant Edwards, Kyrie back and forth, but Luka potentially being out again with this calf issue.
Well, and then for the Wolves, fortunately, not their meltdown. They managed to escape and survive it. But yes, Luka, late second quarter, makes a routine move where he picks up his dribble, goes into like a kind of a step back type of thing, plants that left foot. At first, I thought maybe he aggravated the heel. Remember, he missed a couple games last week with the heel contusion on his left foot, but then he's reaching down, and he was reaching pretty low on his calf. Wasn't able to get back on defense. They just couldn't move. Wolves get a bucket playing 5-on-4 on the other end. Mavs call timeout, and Luka hobbles to the locker room, ruled out for the game. Minutes later, as you mentioned, he's had trouble with his calf before. This is the calf that he strained the regular season finale in 2022. Cost him the first few games of that playoff series. I think it was 12 days that time. Strained it again in Madrid during last year's preseason. Was able to return for the season opener. They had what they called a contusion that cost him all of training camp and preseason this year. And now this strain. Again, I don't have MRI results. I know the Mavs were bracing for this to be longer than the 10 days to 2 weeks period. That's a kind of a lighter.
Well, the real question is, look, it's either a grade 1 or a grade 2. Hopefully not a grade 3. I think we'd have seen that. I don't know if they've been able to walk.
Right.
If it's a grade 2, which is obviously what they're worried about, they're not saying that.
Mm-hmm.
If it's a grade 2, he's looking at weeks.
Yeah, and right. And again, I don't want to speculate here on the length other than just they're bracing it for it to be more than a 10-day, 2-week type of deal. But look, the Mavericks have had success without Luka this season. This is not like it's been in the past where if Luka wasn't playing, they were a lottery team. You know, they've gone 6-2 without him. One of those losses, Kyrie also sat. They came back from 28 down to get within a bucket against the Timberwolves in the second half. And I'm not sitting here telling you the Mavericks are going to play at some kind of 60-win pace without him. I'm just saying this is not like the bottom. I don't think the bottom's falling out on the Mavericks. Now, I think we can forget any Luka MVP discussion, probably any even All-NBA discussion. I think that streak's coming to an end just because he's very likely not going to meet the 65-game minimum, having already missed 8 games.
Yeah, just so people know. Yeah, I was going to say, just so people know, because he's missed 8, he can only miss another 9 over the final 50-ish games. And if he misses a couple weeks, let's say he misses 2 weeks, you're already talking about a minimum of 4 or 5, maybe more in that kind of stretch. And that's, before you factor it into potentially being any longer than that. So definitely going to be hard for him to keep that up for sure.
Right. And so, forget about the Luka award stuff. I think for the Mavericks, it's about being as healthy as they possibly can be come playoff time. And so an injury like this for Luka, like we saw with the deal during the preseason, it's not just about recovering, but it's about recovering and not losing a lot of ground from a conditioning standpoint. Being able to be in the kind of shape that he needs to be in to play at a high level, not putting him back out there where he would be at risk of aggravating it or re-injuring it. Also, if it's multiple weeks, I think you've got to be careful about having Kyrie carry too much of a burden, even if that means, Kyrie's got to have a rest game here or there and you're punting a game. For the Mavericks, I thought the Mavericks were going to end up as the 2nd seed in the Western Conference. This obviously makes that less likely, but it's not necessarily about the seed. They were a 5 seed last year, didn't have home court advantage in any of the series, and were able to get out of the Western Conference. It's about being positioned from a health standpoint, from a rhythm standpoint, to hit the ground running in mid-April.
Well, and it's about staying in the top 6, right? That's really the question. And they're 2 up on 7th. Like that's the concern. I mean, if he ends up missing a month or 3 weeks and Kyrie Irving wears down and they don't win at the pace they did the first time when he didn't play, which, like you said, is probably unlikely for them to continue doing that because of how important he is to their team. If you're down in the mix with the Phoenixes and Minnesotas and Golden States of the world in the play-in mix in a month, if you're the Mavs, that's a much different situation than if you're positioning yourself inside the top 4. If they're positioning themselves in the top 4, I don't think they'll be too worried about where they land, to your point, because they'll feel like they can go anywhere and win. If you're 7th or 8th or 9th, that's a way different story. And we're not talking about the East where you have forever to just sort of get yourself right. You have a bad couple of weeks in the West, you can go from the top 4 to the play-in really quickly.
Now, having said that, you look below the Mavericks in the Western Conference standings. The Nuggets have their own issues right now. The Lakers have their own issues. Certainly the Suns, the Wolves, the Warriors. I mean, I skipped over the Clippers, who I think are going to get Kawhi back. That's on the verge of happening.
Yeah, it seems like it's close.
Yeah, I mean, potentially this week even.
But yeah, I will say this about
the Clippers might be in the best shape of the teams at 5 or below in the West,
depending on what Kawhi's got. But
sure.
The thing I'll say about the Mavericks, they're the number 4 offensive team in the league, and that includes sort of a slow start. If you go back and look at the last 15, 18 games, I think they're number 2. So they have offense. Obviously you're losing one of the best offensive players in the league, but they have firepower. And Clay, correct me if I'm wrong, MacMahon, Clay is coming around. I'm looking at his December numbers in December, which is 9 games, he's shooting 50% overall, 44% on threes. In the first 17 games of the season, he was barely over 30% from 3, but he's
a notoriously slow starter, and that carried over to Dallas.
So he's averaging 16 points in these games. So, Clay is warming up, and, they've got offensive firepower. They're going to take some losses, I'm sure, but this is a team that has more depth than it did a year ago at this time, for sure.
This is the deepest team that they've had around Luka, without question. And again, like when he missed when he missed time earlier this season, he missed 6 games out of 7 at one point when it was back to back against OKC where they won. That was when OKC didn't have any sitters. But then they won 4 of the 5 that he missed with his right wrist and when he was working on his conditioning. I don't think this is a case that the bottom's going to fall out of the Mavericks. I think they're going to be able to keep their head above water. Now, are they going to? This was a team that was really taking off. I think this certainly was going to limit the ceiling, but Kyrie, we've talked about this. He's playing at an all NBA level. But again,
he's been great.
The concern here is, you can't ask him to play 36, 38, 39 minutes a night. It's just tough to ask a smaller guard his age to carry the clear number one offensive go-to burden on a night-to-night basis. But they understand that, and they'll take the.
He is taking as few as shots as he's taken since early in his career. It's been like 7 or 8 years since he's taken this few shots. So I say this few, he's still averaging 18, but he's taking fewer shots. There's room in there for him. It's not like, there's room in there for him to produce more without playing in more minutes. So I think his obviously his usage rate will go up. But I mean, it's a bummer, but what you're hoping for is not an injury that would impact Luka for the rest of the season. What you're hoping for is to let him get back, and you've certainly equipped your team to have depth to deal with injuries. So that's
as long as the bottom doesn't fall out, to your point, MacMahon, they'll be fine. Like as long as they, they're able to tread water and stay at or a little bit over 500 with him out of the lineup, which they've shown they're capable of doing that, then, ultimately it might impact some individual stuff for him, but it still puts him in a position to be ready to do what they want to do in the spring.
I mean, look, would you prefer not to have to see the Thunder until the Western Conference Finals? If to be the 2 or 3 seed, not to have to see the number 1 seed until the West Finals, that'd be preferable. But they saw the number 1 seed Thunder in the semis last year and beat them in 6 games.
They're certainly not going to be afraid of playing them if they have to play them again.
So they've got to be careful here. They've got to get Luka right. They've got to get him ramped back up. And that's going to be a while down the road.
All right. We'll look for that update, and we'll be keeping tabs on that. Bontemps, the game you were at in Boston yesterday, not a game that we thought was going to produce a lot of drama, but is that exactly the opposite turned out. And I will say that as the Sixers get far and away their best win of the year, I think I saw they were 9.5-point underdogs, so that made the second largest upset on Christmas Day since 1990. The last time I think the only one that was bigger was the Warriors lost to the Rockets like 5 years ago, and Curry didn't play that game. It was a late scratch, so it was maybe not even a comparable thing. But the crazy thing about this is that quite often when we see the Celtics lose, either we see the guys are out, which they had their key guys yesterday, or we see them have an ice cold 3-point shooting game. We always talk about the sort of their Mendoza line if they're under 33 or 35%, whatever it is. But this game, they shot the 3 very well and made over 20 of them. And I think the stat was there's their first loss in the last 2 years where they've made 23s and lost. They had been 25-0. So this was not a situation where they were just, didn't have it. They got flat out beat. And Tyrese Maxey with a tremendous game, 30 and 10 assists, Embiid with great. And then obviously Caleb Martin, I think he went 7 and 9 on threes, but he was a difference-making player. And I'd say this, no matter what the 76ers have been through, this reminds you of what they can do when they're clicking, and they've been getting their feet up underneath them as they've been gotten more and more healthy.
Yeah, I mean, Drew Holiday didn't play in the game on Wednesday, and Kristaps Porzingis played about 12 minutes before he left with an ankle injury. And early in the game, in particular, the Celtics are really hell-bent on trying to get Al Horford and Kristaps Porzingis as many threes as they could and really testing Joel Embiid's mobility, and they were giving the Sixers a lot of trouble with that. So, I mean, that played a part in the game. But yeah, I mean, I haven't updated the stat lately, but I think that was their second loss since Joe Mazzulla became the coach when they've shot over 40% from three. Like typically when they hit their threes, they win games. And the Sixers deserve a ton of credit. They got production from everybody who played. It was a really good Kelly Oubre game. So, some of the other, Caleb Martin, obviously, reprised his role as the Celtics killer from the 23 conference finals, going 7 for 9 from three.
That's right. I'm sure they'd seen
funny.
That before.
People in the building were literally going, "Oh no, here we go again," with Caleb Martin hitting shots at the Garden, which was pretty funny. But yeah, look, I mean, Tyrese Maxey has put up pretty good numbers this year, but has not played like an all-star for most of this season. He has not shot the ball the way he's capable of, and he was fantastic in this game. And Joel Embiid was out there and moved around pretty good and played pretty well. And even though Paul George didn't hit shots, he had been wearing this very big, bulky brace on that left knee, and he didn't have it on and was moving around like Paul George again and looked much better physically moving around. So yeah, look, it was easily their best win of the season. They're now 8-3 in their last 11 games. They're remarkably 3.5 games out of 6th place in the East after being 3-14. Shows again how bad the East is and how you just have an infinite amount of rope to pull yourself back into things if you have the talent to get there eventually. And, they're now headed into a very interesting stretch of their schedule where they're going west to play Utah, Portland, Sacramento, and Golden State. Utah and Portland stink. Sacramento is all over the place. And the Warriors, I think, have lost like 10 of their last 12 games or something. Like
10 of 13.
Yeah, the Warriors are not playing well. Sacramento is not playing well, and the other two teams are playing for Cooper Flag.
And then they come back to play.
So was
Brooklyn,
the last team
who
they're
just
playing
traded their right. They come back to play Brooklyn, who just traded their starting point guard and might be trying to, certainly looking to move other veteran players down the road too. So, look, if they have to go at least 4-1 in that stretch. If they go 4-1 in that stretch, I think they're back to 15-18 on the season, and they'll have won 12 of their last 16 games. And you'll be talking about a team that's, sitting there in somewhere around 6th place in the East. Now, do I think they're beating Boston in a series? No. Do I think their ceiling is where it was at the start of the season? No. But they at least have put themselves now in a position where they can do some of the things at least that they wanted to do and give themselves a chance to get in the mix, which I certainly didn't think they were going to be able to do a month ago. And we were talking about whether it made more sense for them to try to keep their top 6 protected pick than go for a playoff spot. And like you said, when those 3 guys are out there and playing and healthy, and they get some help from Oubre and Martin and Gershon Yabusele, who again had a really good game yesterday, playing his first official game back in Boston since getting dumped a couple years ago in a trade. Like, they show they can be a team that if they walk out there on the court against anybody but the Celtics in the East, they're going to give themselves a shot to win in the series.
You say anybody but the Celtics, and obviously, look, Celtics are defending champs, cruised to the championship last year, had their top 6, the strongest top 6 in the league back, some health issues, but I'm curious what you think, having been around the Celtics some recently, of this little funk they're in. They've lost 4 of 7, starting with a loss to a really good Memphis team. They also lost to a not good Bulls team, a Magic team that's missing their 2 best players, and then the Sixers. What do we make of this little funk the Celtics are in?
Nothing. I really don't think much of it at all. They obviously the game the other night, the Orlando game, they went 8 for 33 from 3, and Jason Tatum didn't play. They had a couple guys missing and didn't play at the requisite force for a lot of the game against the Sixers, but the Sixers played their best game of the year. They shot 40-something% from 3. Their stars played great, made plays down the stretch. Celtics almost came back and won the game. The Sixers once again went from up 15 to up 4 in about 5 seconds. They lead the league in blowing 15-point leads in a blink of an eye. But yeah, I mean, I think they're a team that's in the December doldrums, that's had sort of a rotating cast of guys dealing with injuries and issues lately. Sam Hauser's been playing through a back injury. He has not, or back issues, I should say. He has not looked great for a while. You know, I just don't, I have zero concerns about where the Celtics are at, assuming they're healthy later on.
Yeah,
if their guys are hurt, then that's a different story. But I'm not worried about this at all.
I'm not quote unquote worried about him, but the answer is the basic answer, MacMahon. They're missing threes. In this 7-game stretch, they're number 1 in the league in attempts, which of course they are, and they're 25th in percentage. And, you know, when they miss a lot of threes, they're vulnerable. And this is the thing. They didn't actually miss a lot of threes in this game. But, you know, if you're looking at the ways to figure out how to beat the Celtics, when they are cold on 3 and when they lose focus, those are the 2 things that happen to them. And they've been a little chilly on 3 in this stretch. But we have a mountain of data that says that's not going to be the case, that they have great 3-point shooting. In this game, Peyton Pritchard and Hauser, I think, were 0 of 17 or something like that.
I mean, I don't know if it was quite 0 for 17, but it was...
I thought it was 0 of 8 and 0 of 9. Maybe I had that wrong, but...
Yeah, there might have been somebody besides Hauser, I only think, took a shot or 2. But
oh, really? Okay, I got that wrong then.
Yeah. Pritchard was 1 for 9 and 0 for 8 from 3. So you combine
that's what
his stats together and made 1 for 17.
My fault.
But yeah, look, I mean, they, you know, in the Memphis game, they were 18 for 60 from 3. Memphis shot 45%. In the Bulls game, they were 14 for 56 from 3. In the Orlando game, they were 8 for 32 from 3 or 8 for 33 from 3. So yeah, like they have not hit shots for a couple weeks. It's December. They're in a bit of a cruise control holding pattern because they know who they are and they're sort of waiting to get to the playoffs. I mean, seeing this, I was actually talking to somebody during the game yesterday that it reminded me of the LeBron Cavs teams from back in the day, where by, you know, these guys have played 135 playoff games the past 7 or 8 years. They've played, you know, they're just trying to get to the end of the regular season and then get to the playoffs. So they're going to be prone, I think, to have some moments where shots are going in and guys are in and out of the lineup and they don't play great. But I don't think there's anybody in the East that, if these guys are healthy, is beating them 4 out of 7 games. I don't think it's particularly close. The last couple of weeks hasn't changed that.
That's shots fired at Cavs quarter.
Well, let's see what
Cavs quarter.
The Cavs are beating everybody by 20 points right now. They've had a couple of fortunate little moments, like they played the Bucks their first game after the NBA Cup, and Dame didn't play, and then the next day they played you talked about the Sixers being 8-3. One of those losses was to the Cavs. It was the second night of a back-to-back, and
Joel Embiid didn't play, and Paul George probably shouldn't have played because he looked very tired. Yeah.
So, but the Cavs start a very crucial 6-game stretch on Friday in Denver. It's a West Coast trip, at Denver, at Golden State, at the Lakers, at Dallas, which, might not see Luka in that one. Then they come home for the Hornets, and then they play the Thunder. So I guess, I don't want to give them Hornets game, but, yeah. So they're 26-4. They've now got a 4-game lead in the loss column over Boston.
I mean, not only 26-4, but a plus 11.3 net rating.
Yeah.
I mean, they have been absolutely dominant.
Yeah, they also just got Max Strus has played 2 games, I think. They're ramping him up. He's not starting. They're just bringing up his minutes because he had that terrible ankle sprain. He's missed the whole season at this point. They did lose Isaac Okoro, so they get one wing back. They lose one wing for a few weeks, but they will have their starting 5, assuming no other injuries. They go on this trip with their full starting 5 that they haven't really had all season. So it'll be a great test for them. Nuggets coming off the loss to Phoenix on Christmas. So speaking of hot streaks, I want to talk a little bit about Mikal Bridges. So Bridges has one of the best games of his career on Christmas Day. We did not expect a Victor Wembanyama versus Mikal Bridges duel, 40-point versus 40-point duel at the Garden to kick off Christmas. But that is what we got, and Bridges was great. After the game, Josh Hart, his longtime friend and teammate at Villanova crew, he's like, I'll be accepting apology forms from the media. But the truth is, Bridges was really shooting it very poorly over the first 20 games of the season. He just was.
To Josh Hart's credit, though, when it was like the lowest point for Bridges, he basically said, "Get off his back, calm down. But he's going to be fine."
Josh Hart had to do that because of how badly Mikal Bridges was playing. It wasn't it wasn't.
And you got to give credit to Tibbs because Tibbs kept running him out there for 40 minutes. What a great job by Tibbs. Never had.
And I'm agreeing with you, MacMahon. There's a reason why Josh Hart gave that sermon in the locker room. It was because Mikal Bridges was playing badly and he was under a ton of pressure, and he did go to bat for him. And since then, he has played much better.
All right. So last 11 games.
It earned Josh Hart the right to have one hell told you so, and to demand the apology forms and all that kind of stuff, because it's not just one game, Wendy.
Here's the 11 games in December for Mikal Bridges. 58% overall, 47% on three, averaging 23 points a game and 40 minutes played in that stretch.
His plus minus per game is plus 14.4.
Wow.
I mean, he's playing 40 minutes a game.
So
this is the guy that they gave up 5 first-round picks to get.
Yep.
This is absolutely what they, and this is more than, like, they didn't necessarily want Bridges or
but he looks like
a game with this kind of. But they thought
he looks like an elite wing player again.
Yes,
he looked like a pedestrian wing player for the first 6 weeks of the season, and now he looks like the guy that everybody thought they were trading for in the spring, which has been a big boon for them.
So the Knicks have won. So the Knicks started off 10-8. That was where people were kind of looking at him a little sideways. They are now 20-10. So they've gone 12-2 in their last 14. There's been some games in there like they caught the Pelicans in there twice when they were just reeling. They caught the Magic in there. They had the first win. They were the first team to win in Orlando, but it was also without Banchero, and Franz Wagner right after he.
They got a couple Raptors games, a Hornets game, a Pelicans game. That Magic game.
And
they just had a full-fledged Victor Wembanyama experience and survived it.
We'll talk about that in a second. But so they've now won 5 in a row, and their next 4 games are at Orlando, which Banchero seems to be getting closer. He's taking part in practice again, but he's not going to be playing on that game on Friday. Then 2 games in Washington, and then home to the Jazz. So they've got a shot here to really tear off a run. If they keep playing this way. And I will say that, yes, Bridges is playing better. Towns is putting up good numbers. Brunson's putting up good numbers. They also, in this stretch out of these 14 games, they've been a top 10 defensive team. They were a bottom 10 defensive team in that first 18 games. And I will say, while Josh Hart was defending the honor of Mikal Bridges, in that stretch, Tom Thibodeau was saying that their fundamentals were good, that their results he didn't feel were indicative of of how they were fundamentally playing, and their defense has improved. But it was all of those things, including the schedule, that has contributed to this.
I would say the defenses look better because of the schedule, and I think you saw, obviously, Victor is a unique animal on a lot of levels to try to stop, but I think you saw in the game yesterday. Where there are still some real concerns defensively for the Knicks as a whole, and in particular with Karl Towns, who was doing a lot of Karl Towns things, not guarding Victor, not getting up into Victor at the 3-point line. I would like Victor to shoot a few less threes than half his shots from 3, like we've talked about before, albeit he was fantastic in this game. But Towns couldn't guard him out there. Arguably the biggest play of the game was a boneheaded Karl play where he just runs over Chris Paul at the 3-point line, had just a no-hope tackle, but because he did it a split second before Victor made a 3, the shot comes off the board, and instead, I don't think they scored on the possession, ultimately. So instead of being a 4-point play, it turned into a 0-point possession, which was huge for them. But, Karl, Knicks fans have been quick to point out that Karl's rim protection numbers have been better
lately. They certainly have been better than they were the first month of the season when they were wretched. But I still have some concerns at the higher levels defensively for the Knicks, albeit with the way they've played lately, it certainly has looked better. But the bottom line is their offense is doing exactly what they needed it to do to have a chance to be the team they hope to be. And that's Carl playing the way he is and been phenomenal at that end. And now it's with Bridges playing the way he is offensively. You put him out there with Brunson and Carl and the rest of these guys, and it's not a surprise. They're one of the 2 or 3 best offenses in the league.
Brian, look, Tibbs clearly had some concerns about Cat on the defensive end yesterday because Cat was a crunch time cheerleader, and hey, Victor's going to make a lot of there's a reason not many opposing bigs get that matchup in the first place.
Yes.
But he's gonna make a lot of opposing bigs look bad if they're.
I'll tell you what, he better cancel all Christmas plans for the foreseeable future because
he seems to like that stage. Yeah, bright lights, Christmas lights. He likes all that stuff.
He definitely likes the attention. There's no question about that. It's one of the things we like about him.
42 and 18 in his first Christmas Day game.
4 blocks, 4 assists.
He's now by the way, he is now averaging 4 blocks a game.
Dude,
he's ticked up to the average of four blocks a game.
It's not even about the blocks, honestly. It's watching the way guys react when he's on the court. You see guys catch the ball in the paint and they don't look at the basket.
Yeah.
It's amazing. Just because he's like in the zip code. Might be 5 steps away from him. But they're not, guys are just not attempting shots because they're afraid he's going to come over and block it out of the gym.
His December numbers are cool. 29 points a game on 49, 39, 90 shooting. And the 39's on 10 threes a game, Bontemps. 10.7 rebounds, 5.2 assists, 4.7 blocks. Victor is...
He's averaging 5 blocks a game.
He's in the process of playing his way, certainly into All-NBA territory, possibly, and the record will factor into this, but possibly into MVP ballot territory. I'm not going to say MVP this.
He already got it. He already got a vote in the straw poll.
One vote. I'm talking like
relax.
Ballots.
Relax.
Okay.
They're a 500 team that's played the vast majority of their games.
500 works for you, MacMahon.
500 get me fit.
Our system has them currently on pace to win 38. Victor's time on the top of
your
MVP
system.
balance.
Cancel the rest of the season, Wendy. Bontemps' system. He punched some numbers into a computer with one finger in his nose.
Our BPI projections have him winning 38 games, which
I can come up with a lot of things that BPI.
Okay, that's still winning your bet. The point is, he's not going to be MVP this year. We don't need to. He's going to have. My point is, the day is coming.
Straw poll, straw man. I didn't say he was going to be MVP this year.
Okay.
I said he's going to be. He's playing his way onto ballots.
Okay.
I bet you. You want a little side bet on All NBA?
I mean, the guy's averaging 4 blocks a game. He's got to be, and half the players in the league are going to be eligible for All NBA. I'd be surprised if he doesn't make All NBA at this point.
Okay.
It's not doubling that bet down.
Nope.
Why would I double the bet down?
I'm just teasing you. Don't get
all. Hey, we got a sequel.
I'm not the one who has artificially lowered the bet. No,
it's not. Is feisty.
I get annoyed when the person who has tried to get the bet down to 30 games after originally saying they were going to win 42 games and running away terrified from his prediction is now putting words in my mouth.
I said that was his feeling, and I might have been a little bit low, baby. Might have been a little bit low.
I will bet they're not going to be over 500 at the end of the season.
They're as far as I can tell, they're on a 67 win pace. They've only got 15 losses. Probably won't never lose again.
Probably won't. But yeah, look, I mean,
he was not. By the way, he was not happy they lost that game. And this is something that has repeatedly happened since he was in his mid-teens. He does not take solace in putting up numbers and his team losing.
He does. The thing that I liked about that game yesterday, beyond the comments after the game, which were great, just like, yeah, we got to get to play the way the Knicks played down the stretch of the game. I thought it was noteworthy, at least to me, that in the winning time portion of the game, yes, he took some threes late, but there was a lot of him getting to the rim when the game mattered. And it was like, oh, I could get to the rim and get a dunk or a layup without a problem. And if we get from Victor taking 31 shots and 9 or 8 of them are threes instead of 16, I just think he's going to end up with an extra 8 dunks a game. So that's my only point on that. But I mean, look, yesterday was just a precursor of what we're going to see, like you said, Brian, for the next 15 or 20 years, however many years the guy's playing in the league, because he's going to be a fixture on Christmas going forward. And that game was, I watched every second of that game, and it was appointment viewing, and it was awesome.
Yeah,
the ratings, by the way, were excellent yesterday. Unexpectedly excellent, considering the NFL. The NFL games were not great, but the NFL up 84%. I think
were great. First 4 games were awesome.
All the NBA games were good. The last one was the least competitive, and it was still a decent game. But
I want to say 2 things here before we move on to our next topic. One, when it comes to the discussion about the state of the NBA, I'm going to default to David J. Stern.
Ooh.
You know, David Stern, he used to come around all season long to games, and whenever he was in town, he would meet with the media informally. It was on the record, and he would lecture the media. And sometimes it was lecturing, and sometimes, it was teaching. And one of the things that David would say is that you always bet or believe in the greatness of the game. Whenever you're worried about something, whenever something's out of whack, whenever something looks like it's concerning or something's going the wrong direction, you believe in the greatness of the game of basketball. And so that's what I will say. It's easy to say that after Christmas Day because that's what happened. But the longer David Stern is longer with us, the more I respect the things that he said, including the stinging rebukes that I got on several occasions, although I was not in the top 1,000 of those, but I got them. And he is very sage. He was a commanding presence, but very sage. That's one thing. The second thing I'm going to say is something I said last year, and I'm going to repeat it now. At some point, a superstar player is going to figure out that he needs to get himself to San Antonio. However that happens. Somebody is going to see the open path and going to get themselves next to Victor Wembanyama.
And maybe not even a superstar, maybe just an all-star, because it's going to be Victor's franchise. They have put a competent supporting cast around him. Sooner than later, they need to find a co-star, either one emerge on the roster, but I think much more likely it's going to be necessary to find that player, probably via trade. Are we going to get into that conversation?
I don't think we need to get into it yet, but
listen.
But I do think what I do think is true is that this is not a guy who is going to just patiently sit here and chill and be like, oh yeah, we're just going to roll along.
But they've made massive strides this year.
No, I'm not saying that they're on the clock or something, but it's like you look at him. It's like you said, Brian, a lot of guys at 20 years old would have had the game they had yesterday, and they would have been fine after the game. They would have said, we'll get him next time. They'll be fine. We're gonna get there. And Victor is on at the mic or wherever he did media. I didn't see where he did. I assume he was at the podium, saying things like, "This is not acceptable. We look at how they played at the end of the game and the energy with which they played at the end of the game, and we have to match that. And it's going to be amazing when we get to that point." And these are not things you hear 20-year-olds say after they go for 42-18, 4-4 at the Garden and are within striking distance of breaking Wilt Chamberlain's all-time record for a Christmas Day debut. That's not what you hear. But this guy, whether it's back in the silver medal or the gold medal game when they won silver and lost narrowly to Team USA, he was not satisfied with that.
Let me remind the quote, and I will credit it because I think it was said exclusively in English, at least, to Mike Finger of the San Antonio Express News. This is what he said when they lost the Olympics, and this is what I thought about when he basically said, he didn't say it this strongly after they lost on Christmas, but he was basically like the same concept. He said, "I'm learning and I'm worried for the opponents in a couple of years."
Yeah.
You know?
I mean, as I've said a few times, the thing that I find the most remarkable about him, for all of his prodigious physical gifts, which are singular in their combination, is his confidence in himself is also singular. And he says things in a way that if anybody else said them would come off as wildly arrogant. And he just says them in a matter-of-fact way that just implies the amount of belief he has in himself. And then he goes out and does things like put up 42, 18, 4 and 4 and average 5 blocks for a month. And, you know, he's out there doing stuff we just haven't seen before. And he's 20. Like it's pretty unbelievable on every front.
Yeah, the Victor and the Spurs are on their way, and they've got a lot of ammo, probably down the road as far as not before this deadline, but they've got a lot of ammo to, you know, go guns a-blazing. And they could have done it last summer with Trae Young. They opted not to make that pursuit. I'm just going to say the De'Aaron Fox thing would be awfully interesting. I don't think they would be the only team that would have significant ammo to be in on that.
Can I have maybe an unpopular opinion?
You don't think
It's
Fox
going to be
is
the
that
first
good?
time.
That's why I said it that
First
way.
time he's asked for permission.
Are we sure De'Aaron Fox is that much of a difference-making player?
I would say that De'Aaron Fox is averaging 27 pretty efficiently, 27-6. He's a proven.
What's his team's record?
I would say that I think his record would be a lot, and no disrespect to Sabonis, but I think his record would be better if he's playing with Victor Wembanyama.
I asked what his team's record is. They're 13 and 17.
Didn't you say that about all three Kings stars?
I would say that De'Aaron Fox is a very good player. I would say the Kings have made the playoffs one time in his entire career. And I think he's a very good player, but I'm just not sure. Like, to me, I don't think there's a huge level of difference in terms of the level of player of Trae Young and De'Aaron Fox. And I feel like we're going to head into a 6-month period where there's going to be all sorts of discussion about where De'Aaron Fox might land at trade. And we just spent the last year with nobody really having any interest in trading for Trae Young. And I think if you have either one of them, you're sort of in the same fundamental place. Now, again, you could argue that putting one of them with Victor Wembanyama is a different story because of all the things he can do. But I don't know if I'm a team that's got all these assets to burn. I don't know. My point is, are we sure that the right move is to burn a bunch of them to trade for De'Aaron Fox?
I think De'Aaron Fox's defensive capabilities are just at a completely different level than Trae Young, simply because he's so much bigger, more athletic. And listen, I understand the Kings have not been a great defensive team. I do think that differentiates him. They're very different offensive players. But if Fox isn't elite, he's at least, he's an all-star caliber offensive engine. I think it'd be a very interesting fit with him, with Victor in San Antonio. I also think he'd be a very interesting fit with the Houston Rockets. He's a hometown Houston guy. I've talked before about how the Rockets, one, they want to be patient, give the guys they have, the young guys they have, the opportunity to show they can be stars. I think they're going to have to trade for an offensive engine. I think if you put De'Aaron Fox as the offensive engine on a team that desperately needs shot creation, but is elite defensively, that could be awfully interesting. Now, if this sets up, like the tea leaves are reading that Fox is going to ask out. I mean, come on, like it's pretty clearly reading that way.
I don't think that's necessarily true.
I don't know, man. When you're doing podcasts with Draymond and kind of setting the foundation, and then
look, you just said it. The guy's averaging 27 points a game, and we have a lot of guys who are not going to be eligible for All NBA. If the guy makes All NBA, he's offered the Supermax, he's not going anywhere.
I don't think he'll be All NBA. If he is, then that obviously changes the equation there. If he does ask out, I certainly San Antonio and Houston, keep an eye on those two. I don't know. I've heard Lakers. It's hard for me to tell how much of that is just people jumping to conclusions because he's a clutch client. And then I've heard Miami. with, the Bam connection there. I don't know. And who knows what other suitors or which one of those teams will actually be suitors if it comes to that. But I think Fox is a hell of a player. I think he'd be, if you put him in Houston or San Antonio, I think that'd be pretty scary.
Yeah. Okay. So we'll have time to discuss that later on. Not in this podcast. I do want to talk about the Lakers real quick. The Lakers won their 4th game out of 5, at Golden State. They really benefited from Austin Reeves coming back. I'm not necessarily saying that it's just Austin Reeves, but Austin Reeves coming back from that injury has given them more potency. He certainly made a difference with the triple-double, including the game-winning basket on Christmas. Just toasting Andrew Wiggins.
And
Wiggins had a couple of defensive possessions in this game where if this was the 2022 during the finals and you saw the way he was and you showed these possessions of Andrew Wiggins defensively, you would swear it's not the same guy.
Dude, he did as good a job defending Luka in the West Finals as anybody this side of like Lou Dort or Drew Holiday. And he, like you said, game on the line, Austin Reeves just cruised by him for a layup.
I mean, he even shot it with the wrong hand. Like he should have shot a left-handed layup, but he had created so much space, he was able to take a right-handed layup from the left side of the basket. Anyway, it was a good one for the Lakers because Anthony Davis went down in the first quarter with a sprained ankle and they still got the victory. You can look at a lot of things with the Lakers as to why they've made this turnaround. And I hate to be, boring, but it's defense. If you look at the last 5 or 6 games in the league, they are vastly improved. They are top 10 and 5 games is nothing. I understand, you have a bad quarter and that number can change, but they were a bottom 10, bottom 5 defensive team for stretches of this season. They're finally able to get some freaking stops, and all of a sudden their outlook changes. They have been a very good home team this year. They've dumped a couple of games at home where you kind of slap your forehead, including a game to the Pistons just a couple of days ago. But they do play their next, I think, 4 at home: Kings, Cavs, Blazers, Hawks. So they are on a warm streak, and they get some home games. And Anthony Davis said he'll be back for the Kings game on Saturday. So I think acknowledge that. LeBron and Steph had his highest ever Christmas Day game with 38. Had an incredible finish to this game where Steph hit some threes late.
Wasn't any fun. Too many threes. People hate the 3 now. No fun.
I'm looking at the ratings. I think people liked this game, but a great LeBron-Steph game.
It was a Christmas classic with 2 of the legends in league history. I mean, it was an unbelievable game.
It was awesome.
Steph's late shooting was insane. Honestly, I wanted to see it. I was home at that point, and I wanted to see overtime to that one. I didn't want that one to end.
Speak to Mr. Wiggins because that I don't even know what you call what happened. I guess he thought he was going to go right.
I guess
I don't know. But
we're talking a lot about Andrew Wiggins. I thought the Warriors lost that game in large part because Jonathan Kuminga was bad again, and I understand they're obviously have some things they're trying to sort out there and figure out what they're doing. But in the fourth quarter of that game, in the game overall, yes, he has 14 points, but he ends up minus 17 in 28 minutes off the bench. He went 0 for 4 from 3 in the final 8 minutes of the game as things were being played out. He missed an open 3. He missed a drive in transition. He did get a nice steal and hit a couple free throws, but stared at the ball on 2 offensive rebounds that led to a Rui 3. Just made a bunch of key mistakes late, and the plus-minus number there doesn't lie.
Listen,
it was a 2-point game, and he was minus 17 on 28 minutes, and they lost.
I think something they're trying to figure out with Kuminga is which teams are willing to bid aggressively on him in the trade market.
Well, they put him in the starting lineup for a while. They've lost 10 of 13. It didn't work, and they've now taken him out of the starting lineup. He did have a 27-point game in his first game off the bench and Steve Kerr praised him a lot, but actions over words. They would have him in the starting lineup if they thought his efficiency has plummeted this year. I mean, the one thing that you want this guy to do is to be able to score. That's his ability. He is never, he's complained both publicly and privately about his role. He has complained about the number of shots that he got. The Warriors gave him his starting job. They gave him minutes. They gave him shots. He's never played more minutes. He's never, at least while he was starting, his overall minutes are less than they were a year ago. But when he was starting, he was playing over 30 minutes. They've given him more shots than he's ever had. His efficiency has never been worse. So
he's been a bad free throw shooter basically his whole career. He's been a bad 3-point shooter the last 2 years. I just don't. I mean, yes, he's a very athletic player. I just don't really see why a team would be rushing.
He's not
to give
getting
him a
better. Like that's the problem. Like he's not getting better at this point. This is when he should be taking flight.
Rui Hachimura, who he was playing against for large stretches of the game yesterday, who if he's your 7th or 8th guy and he can come in off the bench and score some points for you, and it's a bigger athletic forward who can guard some bigger guys, he can play a role for you, but he's not. And another guy who was picked in the back half of the top 10 of the lottery, but he's also not a guy that I just don't see why some team should be forking over a significant asset to have the right to pay him a bunch of money as a restricted free agent. I think
the conversation then becomes how significant of an asset would it be? He's a spectacularly athletic 6'7", 225-pound, 22-year-old who I know. There are teams, and especially if it's a team in a rebuild that's looking to add potential star power, right? Developing star power. There are teams that have interest. I know that. And look, Steve Kerr doesn't need me to stick up for him. He's a Hall of Fame coach. Has all kinds of championship hardware. Wendy's already his defense attorney. He doesn't need another one. But clearly, Kerr doesn't believe in Kuminga. Like, he can say all he wants. Like,
actions over. Well, he's criticized his shot selection, at times this year.
Well, look, at the end of the day, the situation the Warriors are in boils down to one thing. They whiffed on James Wiseman, and to this point, they whiffed on Jonathan Kuminga. Like, that's just the bottom line. Franz Wagner was the eighth pick in the draft. Like, if they picked Franz Wagner instead of Jonathan Kuminga, where would they be right now? They'd be in a totally different place.
I think it's at the point where probably both sides will be better off moving on. I think Kuminga needs a new situation. I think the Warriors need to get some value for him and move on, because it's like the tension that's kind of been simmering there for a while. It's not healthy. So the trade deadline is a little more than about 6
it's still a ways away. Yeah. I don't know. Kuminga has agitated for a better situation for some time. The question is, how much is he willing to agitate now that he's been taken out of the starting lineup?
Well, and look, the Warriors' options basically are pay him or get some value for him. What do you think? What do you think?
Well, they're not going to pay him because they've already not paid him.
There you go.
So actions over words. Let's keep an eye on the Lakers coming up in this homestand. My point on the Lakers is that they're really the same team as they were last year. And remember, last year they won 47 games. They started off 25-25 last year. Then in the back half of the year, D'Angelo Russell got hot. They improved in some areas. They got healthier. But they were a 47-win team last year. They didn't stink. But to me, this is who they are. They're going to run hot and cold. But let's see what they are.
They are underwater in net rating for the season.
Not good. That's not a good.
They're 12th in the West in net rating. They're almost getting outscored by 3 points per 100. They have a worse net rating than San Antonio, among others. They're 21st in the league. Like, I think they're what they were basically for the first 50 games of last year. To me, they're a 500 to slightly above 500 team that had a very hot couple months from D'Angelo Russell where their offense got bolstered a little bit late. And look, that might be the case again this year. They still have had, for the most part, over the past 2 years, exceptional health for LeBron James and Anthony Davis. Neither one of those guys has missed any sort of significant time. That was a great win for them yesterday to win that game without AD. But if either one of those guys is out for a month at some point, or even 2 or 3 weeks at some point, they're going to really struggle. But if those two guys are healthy on a nightly basis and Austin Reeves is playing well, they're going to be a team that's going to get to somewhere in the mid-40s.
I will just say, in the next 4 weeks, the Lakers are going to be not in Los Angeles for 3 days. They have a road trip to Texas where they play at Houston and at Dallas. They play 11 of their next 14 at home, and one of the road games is at the Clippers.
Well, that's a long trip depending on traffic.
4:05 can be brutal in the afternoon. And I think they've only got one back-to-back in that whole stretch. I think there's one back-to-back, and it's a Portland Atlanta back-to-back.
It's a stretch for them to give themselves a chance to really move up the standings and solidify themselves as a top 16. Like, they got to take advantage of being home for that long. If they can't, then maybe
they're gaining some traction defensively. So let's see whether that's legit or not. Okay, before we go.
Well, also real quick, like everybody else in that territory in the West has their own problems.
True, and the Lakers have their own problems too, as Bontemps mentioned with the net rating. Before we go, we have some action on the Jimmy Butler situation that we just have to mention. This is actually very simple. It seems complicated, but it's actually very simple. Shams reported on Christmas Day that Jimmy prefers to be traded. He is not directly asking the Heat for a trade, but actions over words.
He's not directly, passive aggressively.
Yes. Now, I don't know how sick he is. Okay. I'm not Jimmy. I don't know how sick he is. He could be very sick.
He's so ill, his hair turned orange.
But after the orange hair, he had a game where he played 7 minutes. He took no shots, and then he left for being ill. He missed the next 3 games, including we're recording this on Thursday. He's not playing on Orlando tonight. And as far as I know, he was not with the team in Orlando tonight. Now, I've seen some reporting.
Yeah, he's not with the team. He is expected to meet the team in advance of the Saturday game against Atlanta, according to Anthony Chang from the Herald.
Okay. Maybe he shows up on Saturday and everything's fine. But the Heat, and after Shams' report, Pat Riley put out a statement. It will never be as great of a statement as the statement that he made in New Orleans in, I think it was 2013.
I predicted to someone today that this story would come up on the podcast.
Okay, I won't say it.
No, tell the story. It's a great story. I'm not belittling it. It's an incredible story. That's the reason why I said it would come up.
Danny Ainge said some stuff against LeBron on a radio show in Boston. And there wasn't, by the way, of the Heat stories that took place in those 4 years, that Danny Ainge story didn't rank in the top 50. It might not even rank in the top 75. None of us were like going to ask Eric Spoelstra, hey, what does the organization feel about what Danny Ainge said?
Yes.
But because it was Ainge and the Celtics, Tim Donovan, the Heat's PR, a long time, probably close to 30 years, maybe over 30 years now. I don't know. Head of
he came
PR.
with Riley, I believe.
95.
95 with Riley.
Okay, so whatever. We're about to be in 2025, so it is the math. He's like, I have a statement from Pat. Danny Ainge can go F himself and needs to keep he needs to worry about his own team. And we all laughed and we're like, no, what do you have for us? He goes, the quote is, Danny Ainge can go F himself. I mean, that was on the record. On the record.
Imagine if the Heat had tweeted that statement out in the year 2024.
Yeah. Oh, my God. So anyway, Pat Riley makes a statement today that basically says Jimmy Butler is not being traded on the record.
I'll read the statement.
Okay.
We usually don't comment on rumors, but all this speculation has become a distraction to the team and is not fair to the players and coaches. Therefore, we will make it clear. We are not trading Jimmy Butler. End of statement.
I do think the Butler situation has become a distraction.
Well,
I don't think it's because of Shams reporting.
I mean, dude, we were telling you it was going to become a distraction this summer. Are you kidding me? Like,
that's
what?
Correct.
Oh, man.
It was ticketed for this situation the second he was not extended, and the situation here is very simple.
This message has nothing to do with the media. That is a message for Jimmy Butler.
Yeah,
Jimmy Butler is a 35-year-old star who is going to be either an unrestricted free agent this summer if he opts out of his contract, or opting into I believe, $52 million option for next season. And there is not a group of teams lined up around the block offering the Heat, the sun, the moon, and the stars for Jimmy Butler's services. If that was the case, Jimmy Butler would probably be being traded.
Yeah,
so
they're not saying we're not trading Jimmy Butler because holy moly, it's
correct.
just committed to him and everything's awesome. They're saying, dude, we're not going to make a bad trade just because you're tired of us.
Correct. And if you look at what happened last summer, the thing that the Clippers saw, I think correctly, before say myself and many other people did, was in the new financial climate that the NBA is in, it is much, much worse to take on bad money in a trade to just, quote, get something back for a player than to have financial flexibility if said player leaves in free agency as a result.
Right. The way I would put it is the concept of, quote, losing a player for nothing isn't necessarily true anymore.
That's right. You're not losing a player for nothing. You're gaining flexibility to do other things. And
depending on the situation and the market, and certainly Miami is a market that financial flexibility can be quite useful.
But for any team, Tim, like, yes, you're right that the Heat could potentially go sign another player. But you look across the league right now, there are a lot of teams that just are unable to do anything because of the logjam that we've talked about, both the logjam of money because the cap wasn't going up, because of the ridiculous first apron hard cap trigger that has really prevented a lot of business from going on, in my opinion. I'm sure I'll get another note from the league about that comment. However, if you're the Heat, who have always prized flexibility above everything else, and to your point, are always going to be looking for the next guy to potentially go get, like, taking on a ton of dead money to get a middling asset back for Jimmy Butler is not good business.
Right. So that's why they're saying, like, they would, here's the bottom line. They would the Miami Heat with this statement are basically saying, we would rather have a disgruntled Jimmy Butler or have Jimmy Butler walk for nothing than have Bradley Beal with a no trade clause on our books for $110 million over the next 2 years. That's
or any other bad deal that sends back long-term money. But
the Phoenix thing is the one that's sitting there.
Yeah.
And so that's the.
Would the Heat like to have the worst contract in the NBA for Jimmy Butler? No, they would not.
So because I think, I was talking to an executive the other day, and he said to me, I think the players are 6 months behind the front offices in understanding everything, and the front offices were kind of 6 months behind the CBA's ratification. It took them, and I think us in the media, we're behind too. We're still learning and understanding it. And so I think if you're a fan, you're saying, well, if Jimmy doesn't want to be there and you can get Bradley Beal, isn't it better to have Bradley Beal than have Jimmy Butler walk away for nothing in the summer? In a different era, maybe yes. In this era, no.
You're only doing that if you're getting heavily incentivized. And these Phoenix Suns cannot heavily incentivize the Heat to do that. And by the way, nobody's lining up to heavily incentivize the Heat because Jimmy Butler is 35 years old and it can be a free agent this summer. And we talked ad nauseum about how hard it is to move big contracts in the current league environment. So you put all that together, and I think we're sitting in a situation that very easily could not change between now and February 6th.
Here's the question.
After February 6th.
Here's the question. Jimmy has not played in the last 3 games due to illness.
Oh, well, it's now return to competition reconditioning.
What happens if Jimmy's not there in Atlanta on Saturday? And if Jimmy's not there in Atlanta on Saturday, let's say he is there in Atlanta, but then in another week he is gone again for something else.
I don't know. I mean, I think we'll probably have reached the point where drama and creating distractions and all that stuff is counterproductive for Jimmy.
Jimmy Butler wants to get paid a max contract this summer. That is not the way to do it.
I would say probably the best way for him to position himself to get paid this summer is to play basketball really well.
Do what Paul George did last year. What did Paul George do last year? He played 74 games and he was awesome.
Yeah, Jimmy's great when he's on the floor. It just isn't that often.
He hasn't played the last 3 games due to illness and returned to play conditioning.
And here's the thing: Jimmy Butler is not going to cow Pat Riley and Andy Ellsberg and the Miami Heat into doing something. If they send him home, like
that's what this statement that would be.
This statement is we're going to do what's best for the Miami Heat, which is it very well might be not making a trade, because again, the idea that just they have to get something. No, you'll get something if Jimmy Butler decides to opt out and walk out the building this summer and go sign somewhere. Which, by the way, maybe he'll go sign with the Brooklyn Nets this summer, maybe. But there's not oodles of cap space around for somebody to sign him. So
I think there would be interest in Jimmy in a sign and trade, but you get into the same situation that you have with the Clippers again. Even if there's teams that want to do a sign and trade, the Heat aren't just going to. The Heat would. It has to be a trade that the Heat like.
The Heat have to be incentivized to play ball, and again, in this current environment, you cannot have bad money on your books. I don't think people have understood that yet. And you cannot have a single bad dollar on your books, and if you do, it prevents you from doing anything else. And the Miami Heat, as you pointed out earlier, MacMahon, are a team that can go into free agency and can get players to come there, and will have players want to come there. And if they have some big contract that they that they can't get off their books to do that, then it's just the same as, quote unquote, not getting anything in a deal. Like that flexibility is a tangible thing that they'll get in that scenario. And I don't think that's been counted enough as a potential option.
Not as much as, it's been made clear Jimmy Butler plans to opt out of his contract. That's not a binding agreement.
Neither is Jimmy's not getting traded. Neither of those agreements are statements are binding.
Right. I would just say, as far as the whole opt-out thing, let's see, because that $52 million guaranteed for next season might be awfully attractive this summer.
Well, and frankly, no matter how bad it is with Jimmy, the Heat would rather pay Jimmy Butler to play for them for $52 million than pay another player or two players that they choke down in some Jimmy Butler trade. That's just the truth of the matter. All right. Very meaty pod today, gents. Thank you very much. Thank you to Rafa for taking time out over the holidays to produce this pod. Thank you for watching and listening to the Hoop Collective. We'll be talking to you next week. I hope everybody enjoys their New Year's and the rest of their holidays.
Adios, amigos.